everybody, and welcome back to the Bay Bolts channel. Today, we have another episode of Days of Thunder. We're going to be talking about some Lightning history. It is officially December now, too. It's the Christmas season. I got my Christmas tree up behind me as well. As always, my name is Jake Ricker, and I'm here today, as always, with my co-host, Michael Wax. Michael, how you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing very well. I'm very excited to talk about this period of history. As we mentioned before we started recording, there's a lot of trades, there's a lot of signings, and there's one very particular interesting thing about this period of time.
That is correct. So the years we're going to be talking about today are 2001 to 2004. So with that said, let's get right into it. And Michael, the first thing we have to talk about before we even get into the first season for the Bolts in this time period is the Lightning signed the one and only Dave Andreychuk in the 2000, right before the 2001 season. We signed him to a 3-year deal. At this time, if you remember, there was no cap, so there really isn't a specific cap hit that we know about for Dave Andreychuk's contract, but a huge signing as Dave was so big for this organization in so many ways and still is.
Yeah, getting Dave Andreychuk is huge, a multi-time 40-goal scorer, a one-time 50-goal scorer, scored a ton of points back in the day. And, the wheels started to fall off of him a little bit. He went to Buffalo during the 2000-2001 season and, only got 2 rounds deep. And he looked at the Lightning roster, which had young up-and-comers like Martin St. Louis, Vinny Lecavalier, Brad Richards, and said, you know what, I can make an impact on the roster. And for a veteran presence, I would agree that even though the Lightning didn't make the playoffs in that first season, he absolutely made an impact.
He definitely did. In many interviews that I've seen with other former players, people talk about the leadership, which we'll actually get to in just a minute. But let's talk about that first season, 2001 and 2002 for the Bolts. They finished this season at 27 wins, 40 losses, and 11 ties because we still had ties during this time. They're almost getting ready to come to an end, though, for a total of 69 points. As you mentioned, they did not make the playoffs, but an improvement from the last couple of years, as we had mentioned in the last video, which was probably the worst time for the Lightning, or one of the worst times. So a good season anytime you improve your points from the last one.
Yeah, and I'm gonna go a little bit of outside baseball real quick. This season for the Lightning is very much similar to the 2007 season for the Tampa Bay Rays. Back then, when they were called the Devil Rays, you saw that they had a losing record, but you saw how much talent they had, and you said, okay, this team could make the jump next season. The Lightning, finished with under 70 points for, I believe it's like the 4th consecutive season in a row, probably even more than that. But they were a really good team in terms of individual players. You saw, once again, LeCavalier, St. Louis, Richards, Dan Boyle. You saw all of these guys just look like superstars. And I think that helped the management group think, okay, we need a couple more pieces and we're ready to go.
And just to mention some of the top scorers on this year's team was Brad Richards. He had 20 goals, 42 assists for a total of 62 points, which led the team. Vinny Prospal with 18 goals, 37 assists, and 55 points. And then Dave Andreychuk in his first season with the Bolts, 21 goals, 17 assists, and 38 points. Also, Vinny and Marty rounding out the top 5 there, both with 37 and 35 points respectively. I mentioned Vinny Prospal there, Michael. We need to talk about a couple of the trades that happened during this season or just right before the season. And let's talk about the first one being Vinny Prospal. The Lightning acquired him on July 10th in 2001. The Lightning got over Vinny Prospal and they sent Ryan Johnson and a 6th-round pick in 2003 to the Florida Panthers, a trade that I would say worked out pretty well for the Bolts.
I would say it worked out pretty well for the Lightning. It sucks for Vinny Prospal because he doesn't have a Stanley Cup championship ring. The career of Vinny Prospal with the Tampa Bay Lightning is extremely fascinating. But for the 2 seasons leading up to the championship season, he was fantastic. You know, you mentioned that he was second on the team in scoring in the first season that the Lightning brought him in. He continued his scoring pace in the second season. You know, is not on the team when they win the cup. That sucks, but comes back right after the lockout and, continues that trajectory. He was a really, really good player, and I think one of the more underrated players when it comes to Lightning history. He's not really talked about in that same echelon as Vinny Lecavalier or Martin St. Louis.
I think you're absolutely right. Vinny Prospal, despite not being a huge name, was definitely an important uh, person to this Lightning organization over those couple of years. But another trade that happened during the season, actually a little bit before the Vinny Prospal trade, was a trade for the one and only Tim Taylor, who did a lot with the Lightning organization, and we'll get into him a little bit more in the future. But the Lightning would send over to the New York Rangers. I'm going to butcher these names, but Niels Ekman and Kyle Frederick for Tim Taylor on June 30th, 2001. So again, these trades, Michael, we kind of talked about this before we started recording here. Jay Feaster did such a good job with so many of these trades in these 2001, 2002 seasons, which we'll get into those 2002 trades in just a moment here. But he's never sent over too much and got a lot of key players in this organization that ultimately led to them winning the Stanley Cup.
Yeah, and again, I don't like using comparisons. I use them all the time, but it really we need to focus on the team in front of us. But this trade very much speaks to me like the Ryan McDonough trade. And I know that JT Miller was a part of the Ryan McDonough trade as well. But you're sending futures in exchange for veteran leadership. And that's what Tim Taylor brought more than anything. You look at his stats, they're not really mind blowing, but he did bring that veteran leadership. He was a great voice in the locker room. On the Stanley Cup Champions DVD, he got that message from Ray Bork that said, I was in a similar situation a couple of years ago. You guys just got to keep pushing. You got to win game 6, you got to win game 7. And the Lightning did that. And, you know, this isn't the years of 2003, 2004, any years before, but Tim Taylor was eventually the captain of the Lightning. And that speaks for something.
Absolutely. I talk about veteran leadership all the time and how important it can be, and just that locker room chemistry. It can really change a team a lot of the times. And I think Tim Taylor, Dave Andreychuk as well, there were two big pieces, a part of that for the Lightning for many years. But let's move on to the next season, the 2002 to 2003 season. But before we talk about the season, there's a couple of notable things that happened before the season started. I think we need to talk about. First things first, the Lightning got a new captain in 2002. Now, something to note, before this next captain in 2002, the Lightning always had captains for 1 year. They had a total of 6 captains that were 1-year captains. One of them would actually come back to be a captain again for a longer period of time, which was Vinny, actually. But the captain we named in 2002 was the one and only Dave Andreychuk. So the Lightning signed him, and just 1 year later, he would become the captain of the team all the way to 2006. And again, we mentioned that he was such a big part of this organization. Just another thing that he did with the Lightning, and was such a good captain for the Lightning in those years.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people expected him to be captain. I wasn't old enough at that time, but when you sign somebody for 3 years, and their main goal is to try to win the Stanley Cup, and you have a bunch of younger players that really need experience, if your current captain leaves, you're going to appoint Dave Andreychuk as your next captain. It was either going to be Dave Andreychuk or Tim Taylor, two of the veterans. Both of them ended up being captains for the Lightning. So I think it was a great pick. Dave Andreychuk is a very calming presence in the locker room. You see that with his interviews. He's very deliberate when it comes to answering questions. He's been a fantastic contributor for the Lightning organization. And I think a lot of that has to do with his time as a player, and especially his time as the captain of the Lightning.
He had a lot of playoff experience as well as many times. People talk about his career all the time when a couple of times when he would leave a team, I believe with the New Jersey Devils specifically, they would win the cup literally the next year after he left. So he had been chasing that Stanley Cup for a long time. And
Colorado too.
Yep, Colorado too. So that playoff experience, I'm sure, played a little bit of a factor. One little thing I think we should mention too before we get into this next season is that the Ice Palace, which the Lightning have been playing for since that building was originally built, was actually renamed to the St. Pete Times Forum at the time. So, if many of you probably remember that name for the stadium, minor note, but I think an interesting one nonetheless. And then let's now officially talk about that 2002 to 2003 season where the Lightning would finish at 36 wins, 25 losses, and 16 ties for a total of 93 points. Lightning would make the playoffs in that year and would ultimately lose in the NHL conference semifinals. But for the first time since 1905 to 96, the Lightning made the playoffs. A great season for the Bolts.
A fantastic season for the Lightning. Like I said, with the Tampa Bay Rays a couple of years or after, you saw the talent and you said, okay, this team has a chance to make a run. And they got in the playoffs and they were facing a really, really good Washington Capitals team. And they dropped the first two games at home and they won the next four games, whether they were at home or on the road. Even though they came in as the higher seed, that was a big test for the new the new kids on the block, I guess. But Martin St. Louis, a big, big contributor. I always will remember seeing that video package of the Game 6 wraparound goal in overtime to give the Lightning their first playoff series win. Commentary for that game actually was Jack Edwards. I know a lot of people don't like Jack Edwards now, but that's pretty interesting footnote in Lightning history. The next round, they get absolutely curb stomped by the Devils. The Devils were the team to beat that year, and the Devils ended up going on and winning the Stanley Cup. So if you get beat by the Stanley Cup champions, I think that's a pretty successful season. You go, okay, next year we're going to come back bigger, we're going to come back stronger, and hopefully we don't run into the Devils again, and we make it all the way to the Stanley Cup Finals.
Absolutely. And Michael, the team that we're looking at here in this season was almost just about what we had for that 2003, 2004, that magical season. So this was really, truly that first test run. I think the way you put it, new kids on the block, was a perfect way to put it. Let's talk about a couple of the leaders or team leaders for this season. Vinny Prospal led the team in points. He had 22 goals, 57 assists, and 79 points. Vinny was second on the team with 33 goals, 45 assists, and 78 points. Brad Richards and Marty rounding out the 3 and 4 spot. But most importantly, I want to talk about number 5th on the team in points, the one and only Dan Boyle, who had 13 goals, 40 assists, and 53 points. The Lightning acquired Dan Boyle, January 7th, 2002. And Michael, do you know what we gave up for Dan Boyle?
I'm going to take a shot in the dark here. I want to say it's a second and a third round pick.
Not quite, Michael. It is actually just a 5th round pick. We talked about last episode that the Nikolai Hobby-Bulin trade was one of the greatest trades of Lightning history, but this one, I think, by far takes the cake as the greatest Lightning trade in their history. They gave up just a 5th round pick for Dan Boyle.
It's kind of depressing, Jake. If you were the Florida Panthers, that is very, very sad. I remember, when we did research about this, I didn't remember what the ingredients of the trade were, but I did think it was very interesting that the Panthers and Dan Boyle were having an extreme amount of contract problems. So, I mean, just shipping him away for a fifth round pick is not smart asset management by the Panthers. but the Lightning will take it because Dan Boyle, up until probably Victor Hedman, you can make a case about Pablo Gubina, was the best defensive defenseman or best defenseman in Lightning history.
Absolutely. He was a big assist guy as well. He had 40 assists, as I mentioned, that 2002-2003 season, 30 assists that next year in 03 to 04, which we'll get into in just a minute. But yeah, he is definitely up there with some of the greatest Lightning defenders in their history. So very awesome trade from Jay Feaster right there. That was what I believe we would call a fleece against the Florida Panthers. One more trade I do want to talk about too in this 2002 season happened on March 15th. In 2002, the Lightning acquired the one and only Andre Waugh, which is, I think, a very cool acquisition. He was more of a fourth line gritty guy for us. And Michael, again, I'm going to ask you this. Do you know who we gave up for Andre Waugh?
Um, Guy, I don't know because they probably never turned in anything, and I feel bad saying that.
I don't blame you for not knowing because here's who we traded, and I'm not even I'm gonna butcher this name, but is Juhan Yolan, I believe. I definitely butchered that, but that is all we gave up for Andre Waugh, and he was a big part of the team despite just being a fourth round guy. By the way, the Lightning also got a sixth round pick in 2002, so another top notch trade from Jay Feaster.
A very top-notch trade from Feaster. We talk about Andre Waugh. He didn't put up a ton of points. He did put up 10 goals in that 2002-2003 season, which I believe was his career high, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, 10 goals was his career high in terms of a season. But he was basically the grit. Like there's nothing else to describe him as. And he did a very good job because he knew what his role was. Even though when he was scoring goals, he was giving the opportunity for the Lightning to win games, he knew that his line was tasked with shutting down the opponent's top or second lines every single night in terms of, wearing them down physically. And he did that. He did a very good job at it.
He really did. He was truly, I think, a special part of this team and really embraced that, enforcer type of role that is largely not in the NHL anymore today. Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed that episode of Days of Thunder where we talked about the 2001 to 2003 seasons. We actually, when we recorded this, we're planning on talking about the 2004 season as well, but the video was so long that we decided to break it up for you guys. So if you want to see us talk about that 2004 season where the Lightning ultimately won the Stanley Cup, be sure to stick around and subscribe to the channel. Ring that bell so you don't miss out on part 2 of this video where we'll be talking about that Stanley Cup season. So with that said, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. And remember, your Tampa Bay Lightning are your 2020 Stanley Cup champions.